There are these rare, fleeting moments in life where everything just sort of clicks perfectly into place.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like maybe you're standing on top of a mountain you just climbed and you're completely exhausted, but utterly at peace. Or you're lost in a piece of music, and for a split second, the boundaries between you and the rest of the world just completely vanish.
Right, right. American psychologist Abraham Maslow actually called this the peak experience. He saw it as the ultimate symbol of self-realization.
Essentially, the highest psychological state a human being can possibly achieve, right?
Exactly. It's that profound, unmistakable feeling of total unity, an experience that really transcends our normal day-to-day consciousness.
Yeah, you aren't agonizing over something awkward you said 5 years ago.
No, and you aren't panicking about a deadline next week either. You just exist completely and fully right in the present moment.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because today we are embarking on a deep dive into a fascinating philosophical source that takes Maslow's clinical psychological concept and just stretches it to an absolute cosmic scale.
It really does. It goes way beyond psychology.
It poses a truly wild question for you to consider. What if that fleeting split-second peak experience didn't have to be a split second? What if you could exist in that euphoric state permanently?
Which is a huge what if.
Right. And the source we have today calls this permanent state self-harmony. Our mission is to uncover exactly what that state is and the incredibly rigorous path of cultivation required to get there. Because, we are not just talking about having a nice day here.
Oh, definitely not.
We're looking at a framework for a total merging of the self with the universe.
And to understand how radical this proposition is, we really need to look at the foundation the author is building upon. Because Maslow represents Western psychology, observing these peak experiences as the absolute pinnacle of human biological and emotional capacity.
The biological ceiling, basically.
Right, but this source material bridges that Western framework with Eastern spiritual practices. It takes the clinical observation of a peak experience and reframes it as a literal glimpse into a higher spiritual dimension.
It's connecting it to the Buddhist concept of the Elysium world,
Well,
right?
thank you. It's a profound journey, mapping the transition from biology to theology.
Well, before we figure out how to make that state permanent, we have to understand what the peak actually feels like when it hits us temporarily. The author of our source text provides an incredibly detailed breakdown of 18 characteristics of a peak experience.
18 of them, yeah. And reading through them, it honestly feels like a study in absolute contradictions.
Totally. Because on one hand, you have traits describing a totally unworldly peace. The text talks about being free from worldly affairs, feeling fresh and clear, and achieving a state totally devoid of hostility or hate.
The language used to describe that stillness is just striking. It describes everything blending into one harmonious and integrated whole.
Yeah, losing oneself and melting into nature.
Right, and there's a return to an almost primordial innocence. It characterizes this state as being as unsophisticated and pure as a newborn baby.
But then, existing right alongside that profound, quiet stillness are descriptions of absolutely intense, roaring energy.
Oh, it gets intense.
It does. It talks about being in a state where a river flows vigorously, releasing energy completely, being full of confidence as if all can be conquered, literally feeling invincible.
It's definitely not just sitting quietly on a meditation cushion.
Not at all. It's described as being poetic, full of mysterious ecstasy, and blooming one's own nature fully.
What's fascinating here is that the contradiction is entirely intentional. It's the ultimate paradox. You have a complete emptiness of anxiety, paired with the complete fullness of vitality.
Like perfectly balanced extremes.
Yeah, the individual in this state is described as flexible and tactical, able to improvise at will, yet entirely absorbed in the present. They are operating flawlessly, handling complex things with great facility, but without an ounce of forced effort.
The source even includes a series of first-hand quotes from people trying to articulate this state, and the imagery is incredibly visceral. Like one person describes having a vague sense of vertigo accompanied by an exciting warmth, fullness, wetness, and power. Right. Another describes feeling extremely excited, out of breath, their head as light as a feather, like they are floating in a dream world where time has completely stopped.
Someone else simply calls it an almost unbearable ecstasy for a human being.
Those descriptions are practically vibrating with intensity. They use words like charming, blood-rushing, desperate, gone with the spirit, absolute excitement.
It paints a picture of a total sensory overload that inexplicably results in perfect mental clarity.
You know, reading those quotes, my mind immediately went to the psychological flow state, but pushed into absolute overdrive.
Oh, totally. Like flow state times 100.
Exactly. I do have to play devil's advocate for a moment, though, because these quotes sound incredibly physical. They sound like overwhelming biological nervous system reactions.
I mean, one person even describes a sudden gush of roaring fire that is strong, devouring, and wonderful.
Right. So my question is this source really describing a spiritual awakening, or is it just documenting a massive dump of dopamine and adrenaline?
Well, the author actually anticipates that exact skepticism. The text deliberately blurs the line between the physical and the spiritual, arguing that you basically cannot separate the two.
How so?
Look closely at how those individuals interpret their physical symptoms. One notes, "I feel as if being away from my flesh, from my spirit, with no care for everything that matters to my daily self."
So the physical sensation triggers the detachment.
Right. Another describes their own self-existence operating in another dimension, physically floating and melting away from the anchor points of their normal life.
So the physical intensity acts as the vehicle for the spiritual transcendence.
It's the launch pad. The argument here is that these intense physiological sensations aren't just biological misfires or simple chemical dumps.
There's something more.
Yeah, they are literal glimpses of a higher dimensional existence breaking through what one, quote, brilliantly calls the dense fog of daily life. The moment the human body touches the divine, it reacts with that overwhelming roaring fire.
Okay, but if that physical intensity is actually a glimpse of the divine, it sort of exposes a fatal flaw in how we usually get there, doesn't it?
What do you mean?
Well, if these experiences are this perfect blend of peace and roaring fire, how are human beings normally triggering them? And crucially, why don't they ever last?
Yeah. The author points back to Maslow's global investigations for the answer to that. Maslow found that there are primarily two ways mankind currently stumbles into these peak experiences: through music and through sex.
Right, and the source spends a significant amount of time detailing the latter.
Very significant.
The descriptions of sexual climax provided in the text as a peak experience are extremely vivid. They outline a pleasant, refreshing sensation that builds into an irresistible force.
And it eventually grows into what they call a rapid, high-altitude, screening rocket with blast-like pleasure.
The physiological mapping is highly specific. It details the body tightening, reaching a steep peak of bliss, slipping across a high plateau, followed by violent convulsions and spasms that eventually taper off into gentleness.
One of the quotes provided describes it as an utter immersion without willpower. The person is completely disconnected from their analytical mind.
It just conquers and occupies the body.
Right. And they use a fascinating word to describe the overall destructive effect on their ego. They call it temerarious, meaning reckless or completely unheeding of danger.
Like an internal explosion where everything else in the universe just ceases to exist.
Exactly. But that temerarious explosion brings us to the pivotal argument of the entire text. Because the author fully acknowledges that sexual love is the most common, primary way human beings attain a peak experience.
But they don't see it as the ultimate goal.
No, the text firmly categorizes this as a low-level pathway.
I assume because it is entirely dependent on an external trigger and it always ends.
Exactly. The peak experience attained through sexual love is fundamentally short-lived. It is a temporary flash. You experience the divine for a few seconds, and then the dense fog of daily life immediately rolls back in.
Which, that temporary nature creates a massive problem for us. Because if human methods like sex or an incredible concert are just temporary biological hacks, we are constantly stuck in a cycle of withdrawal.
It's an endless loop.
Yeah, we experience the peak, it fades, and we have to go searching for another trigger to feel whole again. So what does this all mean? If these human methods are just temporary, how does one actually sustain the high over a lifetime?
Escaping that cycle requires a profound pivot from biology directly into theology. The author states that the supreme realm for Buddhist study is entering the Elysium world.
And how do they define that?
Entering the Elysium world is defined in this text simply as being forever immersed in that exact peak experience. To do this, one must achieve an enlightened heart that is perceptive of nature. In this specific framework, Buddha is nature, and nature is Buddha.
So to make that peak eternal, you have to fundamentally change your relationship with external stimuli. You can no longer rely on the music, and you can no longer rely on a partner.
You have to turn inward.
Which brings us to the core focus of today's deep dive: achieving the state of self-harmony, or Zikia in the original context.
Self-harmony really is the ultimate goal here, and this philosophy has a very specific definition for it. To attain an eternal peak experience, a single life form must possess both yin and yang internally.
Meaning you are completely self-contained.
Completely.
The text explicitly states that a person who has achieved self-harmony is totally free from needing any external sexual supplement. They remain in a state of absolute oneness with both masculine and feminine energies entirely on their own.
And the visual metaphor provided for this is the Taoist yin-yang fish.
The classic symbol.
Yeah, when you look at that ancient symbol, it is a perfect, unbroken circle containing both opposing forces, light and dark, masculine and feminine, and perfect dynamic balance.
It's a state of absolute completeness within a single entity.
Exactly. Achieving this self-contained completeness is presented as the singular prerequisite for entering the Elysium world and experiencing eternal bliss.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Because I am trying to wrap my head around the mechanics of being totally self-contained. It sounds almost like trying to invent a perpetual motion machine.
Or a closed-loop system, yeah.
Right. Or maybe think about an electric vehicle. Right now, average human beings are like cars with incredibly small batteries.
Yeah.
To feel that peak experience, to feel like we are running at maximum capacity, we have to constantly find a charging station.
And those charging stations are the external stimuli, the thrilling romance, the amazing concert, the sexual partner.
Exactly. We plug in, we get a massive surge of energy, the roaring fire, the vertigo. But the moment we unplug, the battery starts draining again. The anxiety returns.
And we're back to scanning the horizon for the next charging station.
Achieving self-harmony means figuring out how to build a generator inside the car itself. You become both the battery and the charger. You're eternally full.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the radical shift in perspective this text demands. Because in modern society, our entire concept of fulfillment is built around acquiring external chargers. We are told that success means finding the perfect partner, buying the right experiences, surrounding ourselves with the best stimuli.
More is more.
Right. But this text reframes the goal entirely. Fulfillment isn't about acquiring external experiences. It's about integrating the fundamental forces of yin and yang within yourself. When you generate your own completeness, you no longer need anything outside of your own physical bounds to feel whole.
Okay, but conceptualizing a self-charging internal battery is one thing. Actually building it is a totally different story. How does a normal person actively cultivate this state of self-harmony?
Well, the text doesn't just offer this as a neat thought experiment. It lays out a highly structured, rigorous path of cultivation.
Right, a four-step project, basically.
Yeah, it describes this path as an enormous, complex, and systematic project of self-refinement and self-improvement. Attaining self-harmony requires undergoing an intense process of clearing out the old to make room for the new.
And the first requirement on this path is described as de-weeding your soul garden completely, which, on the surface, sounds like a really poetic way to describe going to therapy.
It does function similarly to psychological therapy, but on a much broader spiritual scale. De-weeding implies a total excavation of negative thoughts, anxieties, deeply held prejudices, and emotional baggage.
Because you can't cultivate that balance if your mind is a mess.
Exactly. You cannot cultivate the delicate balance of yin and yang if your internal landscape is choked with the weeds of resentment or fear.
Okay, but then the text takes a massive leap from internal psychology to cosmic accounting. It says you must also pay back all your debts from all of your past lives to achieve highly unattached freedom.
That's step 2, yeah.
Wait, de-weeding the soul garden makes logical sense. But paying off past life karmic debt, accumulating enough merits and virtues in heaven, which is step 3.
It gets intense.
I just have to imagine a modern listener sitting in traffic right now hearing this and wondering how on earth they are supposed to relate to this kind of intense spiritual accounting. It sounds impossibly abstract to actually conceptualize.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the text's theological framework, consider what a debt actually is here. We aren't just talking about financial ledgers. A debt is any unresolved tether to the external world.
Okay, a tether.
Yeah, if you hold a grudge against someone, you are tethered to them. If you carry deep guilt over a past action, you are tethered to that event. The concept of karmic debt, whether you view it literally or metaphorically, represents the ultimate form of external attachment.
That's about totally shedding earthly attachment.
Right. You cannot be a self-contained, self-harmonious battery if you still owe energy to the external world. Settling those spiritual accounts achieves a state of being highly unattached, possessing absolute freedom with no earthly hindrances.
And it isn't just about zeroing out the balance sheet. Step 3 requires accumulating positive merits and virtues in heaven, actively building spiritual equity.
Which leads to step 4.
Right, which ultimately culminates in an absolute cognitive shift, where your consciousness ascends to a perfect state, like a celestial being or Buddha, moving completely beyond human constraints.
It demands a total restructuring of how a person interacts with reality.
And the text actually details a communal application for this kind of cultivation. It introduces something called the New Oasis for Life, inhabited by individuals called genuine celestials.
A physical manifestation of the philosophy.
I have to hit pause here, though, because reading this part of the source, it suddenly sounds less like a personal philosophy and more like a literal compound somewhere. Are we talking about a physical place here or a state of mind?
The author actually presents it as a tangible, meticulously designed environment. The rationale provided is that achieving this level of self-harmony in the middle of a chaotic modern city is nearly impossible.
Which is fair enough.
Right. The New Oasis for Life is described as a collective effort to engineer an environment specifically tailored for deep spiritual work.
So they control the variables.
Exactly. By removing the traditional frictions of society, designing everything from the locations to the daily routines, these celestials can continuously experience joy and freedom.
The theory being that this curated environment facilitates the deweeding and debt-paying required to eventually enter the celestial island continent and enjoy eternal bliss.
It's an engineered ecosystem for spiritual growth.
Now, this highly systematic project moving to a new oasis, settling cosmic debts, engineering an environment for self-harmony, it might sound like a very modern, bespoke spiritual invention.
It does sound new.
But the author argues that the architectural blueprint for this exact process has been hiding in plain sight for centuries.
Yes, the text explicitly anchors this entire modern project to the ancient Buddhist Heart Sutra. Specifically, it points to the story of Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, often known as the Lord who looks down with compassion.
According to the source, when the Bodhisattva attained enlightenment through profound transcending wisdom, he realized a core reality-shattering truth. All forms, feelings, thoughts, behaviors, and cognitions are nothing but illusions.
And this is where the philosophy demands its biggest leap from the practitioner. The sutra argues that the tangible world emerges from the invisible world, and ultimately there is no essential difference between the two.
So what does that mean for us?
It means the very nature of the physical world and of life itself is fundamentally invisible. None of our physical sensations or material realities actually exist in the way we perceive them.
The text lists these illusions methodically. It claims there is no real birth or death, no being or non-being, no defilement or purity, no increasing or decreasing.
Everything is neutral until we label it.
Exactly. Our physical perceptions, what we see, hear, smell, taste, and feel, are actively misleading us. They trick the brain into applying false binaries to reality. Good versus evil, life versus death, ego versus non-ego. The sutra dictates that all of these perceptions, without exception, are illusions.
Recognizing the illusory nature of reality is the crux of transcending wisdom, and the mechanics of this realization are crucial for achieving self-harmony.
How does realizing everything is fake help you achieve harmony?
Well, by relying on this wisdom, the Bodhisattva became entirely free from worry. He overcame all fears and everything that upset him. He successfully abandoned the distorted, illusory world and attained nirvana, crossing over to the shores of absolute freedom.
The source actually shares the final mantra of the Heart Sutra, calling it a great spiritual mantra, a supreme mantra that holds the power to remove all suffering.
Do you have the translation?
Yeah, it reads, go, 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 go to the other shore with transcending wisdom. Go to the realm of freedom. Go to attain enlightenment soon. Just go.
It's incredibly dynamic.
It really is. It frames enlightenment not as passive meditation, but as an active, almost aggressive movement away from illusion and toward ultimate reality.
It's a call to action.
And that, I have to ask a deeply grounding question here. On behalf of anyone listening who still has to pay rent and buy groceries tomorrow,
Fair point.
if the ultimate wisdom is realizing that absolutely everything we see, hear, taste, and love is just a distorted illusion, doesn't that make daily human life feel a bit pointless?
It's a heavy thought.
Right. If the people we love and the goals we pursue aren't real, how do we balance striving for this transcendent other shore while still living in the here and now? How do we avoid just falling into total nihilism?
This raises an important question, and that tension exists at the heart of nearly all esoteric philosophies. But synthesizing the mechanics of the source's argument, the goal of the Heart Sutra isn't to render life pointless. The goal is to render life fearless.
Explain the mechanics of that. How does realizing everything as an illusion actually create fearlessness?
Think back to our battery analogy and the desperate cycle of plugging into external chargers to feel that peak experience.
Okay, yeah.
As long as you believe the illusions of the physical world are real, you are utterly terrified of losing them. You are terrified of death, of losing your partner, of losing your wealth or status. That terror is a massive energy leak in your internal battery.
Oh, wow. So you were essentially enslaved by the fear of withdrawal.
Precisely. By realizing that the physical world is an illusion, you instantly cut the tether of attachment. If loss is an illusion, there is nothing to fear.
Because you can't lose what isn't real.
Right. You are no longer frantically chasing the next temporary high to stave off the anxiety of existence. You patch the leak in your battery. You are finally free to just exist, generating your own completeness through self-harmony. You aren't escaping life. You are escaping the anxiety that makes life miserable.
That brings the entire framework full circle beautifully. Because we started today's deep dive analyzing the intense, fleeting biological thrill of Maslow's peak experiences. Those moments of total unity and roaring fire that humans usually chase through external vehicles like sex or music.
And we examine the mechanical limitation of those biological pathways, the unavoidable reality that they always end, leaving us in a perpetual cycle of dependency, constantly seeking the next external charge.
Right. And from there, we uncovered the text's radical internal solution, the permanent state of self-harmony, building an internal generator by integrating the forces of yin and yang within oneself, eliminating the need for any external dependencies.
We charted the complex, systematic project of cultivation required to achieve that state. Clearing emotional weeds, severing karmic tethers, accumulating merits, and utilizing designed environments to elevate consciousness.
And finally, we saw how this modern project utilizes the ancient philosophical technology of the Heart Sutra, using transcending wisdom to dismantle the illusion of perception, thereby removing the fear of loss, and allowing the individual to reach the shores of true, unattached freedom.
It is a sweeping, uncompromising vision of what human potential might look like at its absolute limit. It demands nothing less than a total transformation of how a person interprets and interacts with reality.
Which leaves you, the listener, with a final thought to ponder as you navigate the dense fog of your own daily life.
And it's a big one.
If reaching ultimate self-harmony means becoming entirely self-sufficient, if it requires realizing the physical world is an illusion, severing all earthly attachments, and becoming completely free from the need for external validation, comfort, or stimulation. Does achieving the ultimate state of human perfection actually mean leaving behind everything we currently define as being human?
Yeah.
Remember that fleeting feeling of standing on the mountain peak, that split second of perfect, roaring unity? What would it actually cost you to live there forever?
Something to really think about.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration. Keep questioning the nature of your own experiences, and we will see you on the next deep dive.